What if the only way to save humanity was to erase every memory of love? The last person who remembered how to cry died on a Tuesday. Dr. Ilara Voss watched through the observation glass as they lowered Marcus Chen's body into the molecular recycler. No one wept. No one spoke. The technicians worked with the efficient detachment of people assembling furniture, their faces smooth as porcelain, their eyes empty of everything except mild professional interest. Ilara felt the familiar ache in her chest, that phantom pain where emotions used to live before the severance protocol had carved them out of 99% of humanity. She was part of the 1%. The keepers, they called them. The ones who remembered what it meant to feel. The year was 2187, and Earth had finally achieved perfect peace. It had taken a plague to get there. The grief virus had emerged in 2156, a neurological pathogen that hijacked the limbic system and amplified negative emotions until the infected literally felt themselves to death. Hearts stopped from the weight of sorrow. Brains hemorrhaged from rage. Depression became a physical force that crushed organs. Within 3 years, 2 billion people had died, most of them screaming. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had offered the solution, the severance protocol. A neural modification that severed the connections between memory and emotion. People could still recall facts, names, faces, places, but they couldn't feel anything about them. A mother could remember giving birth but feel no love for her child. A widow could recall her husband but feel no grief at his passing. The emotional centers of the brain were simply disconnected. Turned off like a light switch. The world had voted by overwhelming majority to implement it. Mandatory severance for all citizens over the age of 12. Only a small group, the keepers, were allowed to retain their full emotional capacity. They existed as living archives, preserving what humanity had been so that future generations might someday remember. Ilara was 34 years old, and she was so tired of feeling. She left the recycling center and walked through the pristine streets of New Geneva. Everything was clean. Everything was efficient. Crime had dropped to near zero. Wars had ended. Pollution had been solved because no one cared enough about profit to resist environmental regulations. Poverty had been eliminated because no one felt greed anymore. Paradise, built on numbness. The neural archive was housed in a crystalline tower that caught the afternoon light and scattered it into rainbows no one stopped to admire. Ilara took the elevator to the 37th floor, where the other keepers worked in isolated pods, documenting human emotional responses for the historical record. She found Samuel waiting in her office. He was 56, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen too much. Another keeper. One of only 3,000 left in a world of 9 billion. They're proposing phase 2, he said without preamble. Ilara felt ice crystallize in her veins. What? The Global Council met this morning. They're calling it the Elevation Initiative. His voice was flat, but she could see the tremor in his hands. They want to sever the keepers. The room tilted. Ilara gripped her desk. That's insane. We're the only ones who remember what it means to be human. And that's precisely why they want to eliminate us. Samuel pulled up a holographic document. Statistics flickered in the air between them. Keepers have a suicide rate 47 times higher than the general population. Depression, anxiety disorders, emotional breakdowns, we're suffering, Ilara. The council argues it's inhumane to force us to carry this burden when everyone else has been freed from it. Freed? The word tasted like ash. They've been lobotomized. Have they? Samuel's question hung in the air like smoke. Look at the data. Happiness indices are at historic highs. Life satisfaction scores have never been better. People report feeling content, purposeful, calm. What they've lost, what we still have, maybe that's the disease, not the cure. Ilara stared at him. You can't possibly believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore." He sank into a chair. "I watched my daughter get married last week. She was beautiful. The ceremony was perfect. And when she looked at her husband, there was nothing in her eyes. No joy. No love. Just recognition. And I stood there feeling enough pain for both of us, enough grief for the entire human race, and I thought, what's the point? What am I preserving this for?" Silence stretched between them like a wound. "The vote is in 3 months, Samuel finally said. If it passes, the severance protocol becomes universal. Mandatory. No exceptions." After he left, Elara sat alone in her office as the sun set over the city. The sky bled orange and gold, and she was the only one in the tower who would think of it as bleeding, who would map color onto violence, who would feel the beauty as something almost painful. She accessed the archive and pulled up videos from before the grief virus. Random footage from the early 21st century. A father lifting his daughter onto his shoulders at a beach, both of them laughing. A couple slow dancing in their kitchen, gray-haired and tender. A young man proposing in a restaurant, his hands shaking, his face radiant with terror and hope. Teenagers crying over movies. Friends embracing at airports. A woman holding her newborn and weeping. All that messy, chaotic, overwhelming feeling. And then she pulled up recent footage. A birthday party where people smiled on cue but never laughed. A funeral where mourners stood in neat rows, discussing the weather. A couple's anniversary dinner where they ate in comfortable silence, neither remembering why this date had once mattered. Efficient. Peaceful. Dead. Elara made her decision. She worked in secret for 2 months, using her access to the archive and the Neural Research Division. The virus had never been fully eradicated, samples existed in containment for study. The severance protocol existed as a digital blueprint that could theoretically be reversed. Theoretically. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had built-in failsafes, redundancies, kill switches. But Elara was brilliant, and desperation made her creative. She designed a countervirus, a neural agent that would undo the severance, reconnect emotion to memory, restore what had been stolen. She called it the remembering. The night before the vote, she released it into the water supply. The first person started crying 3 days later. A woman in Tokyo, standing in a grocery store, suddenly collapsing as 20 years of unfelt emotion crashed through her like a tsunami. She remembered her mother's funeral and wept. She remembered her wedding day and felt joy so intense it burned. She remembered every loss, every triumph, every moment of beauty and horror, and she felt it all at once. By the end of the week, the remembering had spread to 50 million people. By the end of the month, 2 billion. The grief virus returned. Not the pathogen, that had died out decades ago. But the grief itself, unleashed in populations with no immunity, no emotional resilience, no framework for processing decades of unfelt experiences. The weight of accumulated sorrow crushed them. People remembered children they'd lost and hadn't mourned. Marriages that had ended without pain. Dreams that had died without disappointment. The suicide rate exploded. Mental hospitals overflowed. Cities descended into chaos as people felt rage for the first time in 30 years and didn't know what to do with it. 300 million people died in 6 weeks. Elara watched the world burn and understood, too late, what she had done. Samuel found her in the archive on the 43rd day of the crisis. She hadn't left in a week. Hadn't eaten. Hadn't slept. She just sat surrounded by screens showing the catastrophe she'd unleashed, drowning in guilt so profound it had become a physical thing, a gravity well collapsing her from the inside. "They're hunting you," he said quietly. "The council. The survivors. Everyone who's lost someone. Good." Her voice was hollow. "I deserve it. Elara. He knelt beside her chair. "Why did you do it?" "Because I thought." She couldn't finish. How could she explain? "I thought humanity without emotion wasn't humanity at all. I thought I was saving us." "Were you wrong?" The question broke something inside her. "I don't know. Samuel, I don't know anymore. Maybe they were happier. Maybe peace was worth the price. Maybe I destroyed paradise because I was too arrogant to accept that happiness could look different than what I wanted it to be." Samuel was quiet for a long time. Then, "The counteragent is ready. Tanaka's team reverse-engineered your virus. They can restore the severance protocol globally in 72 hours. Do it." The words came out like a prayer. "Please. End this. They want your consent on record. For the history books." He held up a camera. Elara looked into the lens. Her face was gaunt, her eyes red-rimmed, destroyed by the weight of feeling. She looked like what she was, the last person who still believed suffering had meaning. "My name is Dr. Elara Voss," she said. "I tried to give humanity back its heart, and in doing so, I killed 300 million people. I was wrong. Not about the value of emotion, I still believe we need it to be fully human. But I was wrong to force that belief on a species that had democratically chosen otherwise. I was wrong to think my pain gave me the right to impose pain on others. I was wrong to confuse my need to feel with humanity's need to survive." She paused, tears streaming down her face. "Implement the severance protocol. Give people back their peace. And if there's any justice in this universe, let me be the last person who remembers what we lost." The Elevation Initiative passed unanimously. Dr. Elara Voss was the final human being to undergo the severance protocol. They let her watch the procedure on a monitor as the neural agent flowed into her brain, severing connections, snipping synapses, turning off the lights one by one. Her last thought before the emptiness came was a memory, her daughter, years ago, before the first severance. 5 years old, sticky with ice cream, laughing in the summer sun. And Elara had felt such overwhelming love it had been almost painful, such fierce protectiveness it had frightened her, such profound joy mixed with terror because loving someone meant you could lose them. It had been the most beautiful agony of her life. Then the memory remained, but the feeling drained away like water through cupped hands. She remembered her daughter's laugh. But she no longer knew why it had mattered. And in the sudden, infinite silence where her heart used to be, Dr. Elara Voss finally understood, humanity had never lost its humanity. It had simply learned that sometimes, survival means letting go of the very things that make you want to survive. The last person who remembered how to love died on a Thursday. No one mourned. And the world was finally, perfectly, peacefully empty. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.